Welcome to Making It with Terry Wollman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Wollman.
And welcome everybody to Making It. I'm your host, Terry Wollman. My guest today is Grammy Award-winning pianist and hit songwriter-producer Jeff Lorber. I appreciate you joining us each week and would like to share my intention that inspires this podcast. Time passes quickly, and I've learned that we should do what's in our hearts and do it well without apologies or excuses. I encourage you to create your life and art in your own unique way and express your artistry with joy and abandon. Be willing to work uncompromisingly for what you believe in. Success will have a better chance of finding you when you live your life with integrity, focus, and passion. Be selfish with your discipline and selfless in your performance. And don't forget to have fun along the way. If you're joining us in our live audience today, we will be inviting questions and comments during the second half of our show. So make it count and simply request an invite to speak. And my moderator, Dr. Lisa, will bring you on stage to join the conversation. And let me tell you about our guest today. And I'm really excited about having you on the show, Jeff. Welcome again. This is great. Thanks. I've been looking forward to this.
Thank you.
Born in Philadelphia, Jeff Lorber began playing the piano at the age of 4, and as a teen performed with a variety of local R&B bands. His infatuation with jazz began during his stay at Berklee College of Music, and after forming the Jeff Lorber Fusion, he released the group's self-titled debut album in 1977. During the following decade, his band became one of the most popular jazz acts of the period, touring nonstop and even scoring a Best R&B Instrumental Grammy nomination for the radio hit Pacific Coast Highway. Known for his style of weaving together elements of funk, R&B, rock, jazz, dance, and hip-hop, this Grammy Award-winning composer, keyboardist, producer has helped shape the sound of contemporary jazz and so many other styles of music for over 40 years. Jeff Lorber, welcome to Making It.
All right. This is your life.
That's right. I'm going to start by bringing out your first grade teacher. I don't.
Mrs. Kaufman.
Mrs. Kaufman, of course.
Linwood Elementary School. Okay.
And do you stay in touch with her? I'm still friends with some of my earlier teachers, not elementary, but high school.
I'm friends with some high school students, but not teachers.
Okay. There were 3 teachers in my high school that were really monumental in making sure I was okay. And my math teacher, my music teacher, and my drama teacher. Oh, and actually my creative writing teacher. 4 of them. So, but they really kind of took me under their wing, and I'm forever grateful. So you were born, we're close to the same age. You've got 4 years on me. But you were born in Philadelphia. And let's talk a little bit about your growing up in your family. So you started playing at a young age. To me, that means that your family was either musical or wanted you to have creative outlet.
Yeah. My mom was an accomplished piano player. I would go to sleep every night listening to her play. She liked to play, a lot of like Gershwin and Rachmaninoff and some classical stuff and some just kind of like the popular piano tunes of that era. She was pretty good. And then I had 2 older sisters. They were like 4 and 6 years older than me, so it wasn't that close. But they were taking piano lessons too. So everybody
from your mom.
No, they were with the local teacher, who was a guy named Mr. Potamkin, whose brother was Frank Potamkin, who's famous for selling GM cars, Chevrolets in New York and Philadelphia, had a huge car dealership. Anyway, so I was one of those guys with a good ear. And so I kind of used my ear to get away with not really learning how to read that well at first. Not that I'm like a super reader now, but I'm still working on it.
Same here.
Yeah, everybody was having fun with music, so I wanted to have fun too, and that's why I wanted to get into it.
In your Wikipedia page, it says that years active 1975 to present. And so I'm curious what was happening in 1974.
Let's see. Well, that's a good question. Well, what happened was I went to Berklee College of Music for a year and a summer, and then I dropped out because I just decided that I had found some fantastic teachers, but they weren't at the school. I was studying with a lady in Boston named Madame Shelov, who was like a classical technique teacher who was amazing.
Hmm.
When Herbie or Chick Corea or Keith Jarrett would come to town, they would take lessons from her. She was sort of, world famous for what she did. And there was a jazz teacher that I met who was actually, his main instrument was alto sax, but he was a very good teacher, named Alex Elin. So I was just kind of practicing 8 hours a day studying with those two teachers that I was so lucky that I found. I just found them as a result of hearing one of the students at Berklee that was killing it in a practice room and asked him who he was studying with. And he said those two teachers. And I just went out right away and found those teachers and
Hmm.
started studying with them. That was the best decision I ever made in my life because they were incredible. But in a way, I have to admit, in retrospect, leaving Berklee was a mistake because I was getting a
Oh,
lot out of the interaction with the other students that sort of stopped when I
right.
left the school.
That's an
Um,
interesting perspective. Did because they told us, by the way, I don't know if they did that when you were there, but they certainly did, in my first day at Berklee, where, they gave this speech, look around, half of you are going to drop out. I forget the percentages. Some of you are going to drop out because you can't take it or because you get scooped up by an artist because you're that good
well, that was
already.
certainly less frequent, I'm afraid.
For me, I totally agreed. But they said, of those of you who graduate, look around too, because some of these people are going to be the people that you hire and that are going to be hiring you in the
Oh,
future.
well,
And I
that's
thought
true.
that was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's really, really true from the standpoint of when you reach Los Angeles and you start working in the industry here in LA and you become a studio musician and you work on a lot of records, which I was lucky to do for a number of years. So many of the musicians that you meet are they call them Berklee graduates, but that just means that maybe they walked by the school and had a slice of pizza at the pizza
Right.
place on the corner. Like
Yeah.
anybody that had any relation to Berklee, even if they only went to for a semester, Berklee, um, claims them as graduates or
That's
Berklee
true.
students or
Yeah.
whatever. But one guy in particular that's a very good buddy of mine that I've worked on a lot of stuff with is Michael Thompson,
Oh,
who was a
sure.
student there.
Yeah.
And actually, I ended up working with three different people that were students of Pat Metheny's when he was teaching at Berklee, and that's Chuck Loeb,
Hmm.
Michael Thompson, and Jeff Richmond.
Oh,
All
Jeff as
studied
well. Right.
all studied
Yeah.
with Pat Metheny. They have some pretty good stories about, and I guess he was a tough teacher. He basically told all of them that they should quit music, more or less.
It's probably all for my best that I didn't end up studying with Pat.
um, no, I think Pat told Michael Thompson he knew that Mike was a great sort of rock guitarist, and that
Yeah.
he was headed in that direction. So he thought that that was okay, and Michael already knew that himself too. Although
But
he's
all,
got some serious, skills
oh,
as a
Mike. Oh,
reader, and
absolutely.
like the sounds he gets are just incredible. It's
Oh yeah,
unbelievable.
I just had Mike play on a track on my album because I was laying down an electric guitar part, for my album that's coming out next year, but
Hmm.
my COVID album, and I thought, he and we've been friends for years as well, and we've been just saying, oh, we should do something together. So I called him up and I said, I have something for you to do, and he was magnificent,
Yeah,
absolutely,
he's
yeah, which he
terrific,
always is.
and he's a great hang too. He's a
Yeah,
fun guy to hang out with. So
yeah. As a matter of fact,
I was gonna we were talking earlier, and I was telling you that I have a great story about how I ended up at Berklee.
yeah, I want to hear it.
So I was a senior at Cheltenham High School, which also the Brecker brothers they lived in the same neighborhood. My parents knew their parents, and they went to Cheltenham too, but they were like 4 and 6 years older too. They were in my sister's class. Um, but I decided I wanted to go to music school, and I had applied to and been accepted to Cal Arts in the LA area, which, it's a great school. And at the time, I think it was like brand new. It had just started.
Mm-hmm.
And Cal Arts is famous actually not as much for their music as for all the guys that worked at Pixar all study at Cal Arts. It's great. People that are into animation study at Cal Arts. That's kind of what it's turned into. But so I was all set with that. And it was New Year's Eve of 1969 going into 1970. And I had driven up to the Poconos with a friend of mine to go skiing. And we were on the way back and we hit this incredible snowstorm. And we had to get off the roads. The roads were impassable. And there was a resort that was open near one of the exits, the freeway exits. And so we pulled in there and got a room. And it turned out the Buddy Rich Band was playing at the resort for New Year's Eve. And so that was the era. That was Buddy was at the top of his popularity at that point. He had just put out an album where he was wearing a Nehru jacket and he had some arrangements
I remember
of some Doors hits. And I mean, I had that album. So I was and Steve Marcus was in the band.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to remember the alto player. I better remember it because that's the real key guy that I have to that the story's about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can't.
We've
think
got
of it
45 minutes to remember. We can circle back.
So after they played, I was talking. I just about remembered his name. Oh well. I was talking to the alto player, and I was telling him that I'm a musician and that I just applied to Cal Arts, and really into music, and I want to become a better musician. And he said, "Well, you should go to Berkeley." And it was like, Berkeley, what's that? I had never heard of it. And so after that, I went up to Boston and I kind of checked it out. I should be going to Berkeley.
Yeah.
So it was almost like the hand of fate that
right.
like one of those Twilight Zone episodes.
Right. The change of weather literally changed the course of your whole life.
Right.
Wow. I love that story. That's great. By the way, what do you remember the year? Because Dr. Lisa, who's our moderator, might be able to look up his name right now for us while we're continuing our conversation.
Yeah.
Hi, Lisa.
It was the alto player in Buddy Rich's band in 1970, 1969,
Perfect.
1970.
Okay. We might have that answer in a couple minutes.
Okay. I don't know why I can't think of it right now.
So here's something I didn't know about you. In all the years that we've known each other, you studied chemistry at Boston University also.
Well, I was just about to get to that. So, Boston can be kind of a discouraging place for a musician because there's all these great musicians and there's like one gig in the whole city for all of them. If you're a jazz piano player, I think there's hardly any place to play. Right,
for $50 and a hot meal.
Exactly. And so I don't know. I guess I got discouraged for some reason. I was thinking like, I don't think this is going to work for me. I think I should get like a real job, like something that I can really count on.
And Jeff, did you already feel like you were an accomplished musician? Were you confident in your many, many years of training
Well, the thing that really did make a difference. Well, I think I'm sure you know as well as I do that getting good at an instrument, it's something that you work on and you work on, and then one day it's like all of a sudden, oh, I've sort of arrived in a new place where I'm better than I used to be. You don't notice it incrementally from one day to the next.
Yeah.
But at some point,
and then you go, I think I just hit a new level. Wow.
Yeah.
How great.
Sort of arrive someplace when you don't least expect it.
Yes.
But the one thing that I did that really made a huge difference was that summer of 1970, when I was taking a few classes at the school. The summer courses, there's not that much going on, but I practiced 8 hours a day for like 3 or 4 months, and that made a difference. That really made a difference. And plus studying with those great teachers, and both of those teachers were very similar from the standpoint that they were very, very step by step, where you just work on real super basic stuff. Like Madame Shelab, you would work for months and just like play one note at a time, and that's all you were doing. how to play one note correctly. It was really crazy. It's like kind of like one of those, Zen in the art of archery kind of
Yeah.
things.
Yes, absolutely.
We would just work on playing like scale fragments. Like, can you play 5 notes and play them so they really sound right? And her thing also in a very interesting way was about, like, you're not a typist, you're not a data,
Yeah.
input person. You're an artist. You're like
Right.
singing through your instrument. You're breathing. You're kind of breathing through the instrument. And that was just something that she really came up with to make sure that, like, you use the kind of the absolute minimum amount of energy that you need to use to hit the key, and you don't waste
Hmm.
energy, but that your hand is always very relaxed and blood can flow. Like, if the blood's not flowing through your hands when you're playing,
Right.
you're going to get cramps, and
Hmm.
it's not going to be a good thing. So to be very flexible, and to just think about what you're doing, like you're creating music, you're singing like a bird or something like that. It's hard to explain the whole thing. It's one of those things. Like I said, it's almost not. You can't explain it in words. You just have to
I
kind of go through her method.
I suppose I understand because I've been exposed to that as well, fortunately.
Hmm.
But I also think you're explaining it quite clearly.
Oh,
Uh,
thanks.
yeah,
Did you
and
know? Did you know Charlie Banakis when you were there?
yeah, I
Did you
did
ever
as
hear of
well.
him? So Charlie was like her top student.
Hmm.
They were really, really tight.
Hmm.
And for the people who don't know, so Charlie went on to, I mean, obviously became an excellent piano player, but he really became an unbelievable teacher, and he just sort of taught thousands of students, and he had a method of teaching technique and jazz piano that was, actually, Jeff Golub was a friend of mine. He went to Berkeley and he studied with Charlie Banakis.
He did as
So he would
well.
take
Hmm.
other not just piano
Instrumentalist,
players.
right?
He'd take anybody and teach him his method of harmony and applying chords and scales to chord changes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, Jeff
Um,
was another really gifted and like you, not a limited player. He wasn't just
uh,
a whatever.
I was
He played
shocked when I
music.
found out he was like a really good bebop player, because when you heard him play, it was all very much about blues,
Blues
and
and
I
rock
mean,
and yeah, and
it's like
soulful.
practically Stevie Ray Vaughan or something like that sometimes.
Yeah.
But he was a great jazz player. I mean, he had all that knowledge and all those all that techniques, and so I
Well,
was kind of shocked to find that out about him.
but it probably, I would imagine, was an influence on you as well to, or at least kind of validated that, you know, you as an artist don't just stay in one lane, because like I was looking at your credits again in preparation for the show. Your first album, the Jeff Lorber Fusion, came out in 1977, which I thought was a great album. I remember
Oh,
wearing
thanks.
it out, and you're welcome. And thanks for making it. Well, you inspired me as well. But, not many years later, 1982, you've got an album credit. It's a fact with Janet Jackson, where you're playing synthesizer for her. You're doing sessions in pop music. You were writing pop and R&B, hip hop tunes, collaborating with a lot of artists, certainly like through the 80s. As a matter of fact, did you actually, I read something that you had stepped away for 7 years to produce and write. Was that like an
Well,
actual thing that you
what
decided
happened
to do?
was, wow, you touched on so many things. But
Pick any.
one really big thing that happened to me, that you're talking about, this the LA studio scene. So
Yeah.
one of the very first things that happened was, I had been friends with somehow I was friends with Paul Jackson Jr., and I had a band with Nathan East and Paul Jackson Jr. and John Robinson. I think
Mm,
I had hired John Robinson to play on some of my records. That's how I
right.
met him in
Hmm.
the first place. And anyway, John Robinson recommended me to Richard Perry,
Mm.
um, and I kind of became Richard Perry's kind of right hand man, keyboard player, arranger for all of his stuff for, I don't know, at least probably a couple of years at least, I think.
That was a
And
gift.
um, and one of the very first things that I worked on was this song called "Rhythm of the Night" by El DeBarge.
Hmm.
And it was just one of those sessions where you walk into the studio and you just get that feeling like, wow, something good's happening today. Sometimes you just walk in the room and you just know that the sun's shining on you and good vibes are happening, and
you're all standing in the light. You're right.
It's a good day today, So the musicians that were playing were John Robinson, Abe Senior, Dan Huff, who had just moved to town and had already
stepped to the front of the line, right, in the very first year.
In about 15 minutes, he became like the top session guy in town without having to go through any, paying any dues at all, pretty much. And Paul Jackson Jr. was on the date, and I wrote a little chart, which was, just a very basic chord chart that sounded very much like the demo, which is pretty much like what you hear when you hear that record. Is most of the parts are very similar to Diane's demo.
It feels like it because it's sparse, but every note counts.
Yeah, I remember getting the cassette and seeing Diane Warren as the songwriter. And at that time, this was like her first hit, so nobody knew who Diane Warren was.
Right.
But I was thinking like, wow, this writer is really, really good. This is like some good stuff. I was thinking that she had to be like one of those brill building writers like Carole King or, Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil. I mean, Diane Warren, it sounds like a brill building writer, and then I walked in and met her and she was like 19 or something and quite a, do you know Diane at all?
Yeah. Not well, but yes, I do know her.
Yeah, she's not inhibited.
No.
Let's put it that way.
I'm stealing that.
She's very extroverted, and she's got a lot of energy and a lot of spunk. And so anyway, I was shocked that she wasn't, 45 years old and, like one of the brill building writers. Yeah. And I ended up working with her for about a year or two, doing her demos that she was working on too, which was fun. But anyway, yeah. So that's what you hear is when you hear that song "Rhythm of the Night." That's the track, and that it's that session. And I took the solo on a DX7. It was like a kind of what was it, like a flute sound.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
And Richard Perry. By the way, Richard. For those people that don't know, so Richard Perry was an incredible producer. Like. He worked with Leo Sayer and Ringo Starr and had hits. He discovered the Pointer Sisters and produced almost all of their records and was practically managing them, I think. And I worked with him on some Jeffrey Osborne stuff. That song, the Woo Woo song, that was one of my arrangements. I worked with him with Barbra Streisand too on the what's it called, Emotional or something like that. I forget the record. But anyway, we got up to a good start anyway with that Rhythm of the Night thing. It immediately became a huge hit single. And I think to this day it's one of Diane Warren's biggest hits she ever had, or if not the biggest.
Great song. But great production, great performance.
But Richard, when he heard my flute solo, it was like, that flute solo is all wrong. We have to have a trumpet come in and do that or something. So 2 weeks later, he called me up and said, that flute solo, can you play that again, like note for note, except I want you to hold the last note for 2 bars or something. That was the big change you wanted me to make. But
yes, I can. Right.
Anyway,
that would be the answer.
That was kind of a lucky way to get into the music scene. And you mentioned Janet Jackson at the time. That was her first album. She was being produced by Angela Winbush. I'm not sure if you knew.
I do.
Renee and Angela.
I performed with her one time on TV. Yeah, she's
incredibly
great.
Talented. Unbelievable. Just genius. And just the way she used harmony. I just loved what she was doing with her chord progressions. And so we ended up becoming good friends and collaborators, and she hired me a lot over the years to work on the Renee and Angela albums. And when she split with Renee, to keep working with her she married Ron Isley, and I worked on a bunch of Isley records with her, which was fun too. It was hard to get paid from Ron Isley, to be honest with you. But besides that, it was good.
I hate to say this, but why doesn't that surprise me? But I think some of that was sort of the time, and and our business, the music business, is unlike any other business I think, in the world, because it's run by a bunch of people who don't know anything about business. Yeah.
Well, over
So,
the years, it's changed. You
yeah.
know, like back in the day, they had people running the record companies that would
Well,
just let people make records
right.
to a large degree.
Yeah.
We were talking about um,
The other day we were talking, like Clive Davis also is
we were talking about
a
Clive. Now,
lawyer.
Clive wasn't quite that he wouldn't quite let people do what they wanted to do as much as they wanted to do it.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, but it's the music business has changed so much. But yeah, the next set of A&R guys were usually more like people that thought they knew more about music, but maybe they didn't. Maybe Frank Zappa always thought that like the gangsters that would just let people go into the studio and make money was a much better scene than when the record companies were taken over by people that thought they knew something about music.
Right. Well, at least you know what you're getting. It's,
Yeah.
it's uh, so we're just talking about some of the great singers that you've worked with, and one of the things that I've always respected about you, and I think it's a great gift, but part of it is a choice, I think, for you, is that you're really like a singer's piano player too. Like you respect a great vocalist, and you enjoy it, and you know how to insert yourself into the story and make them sound better. And I was always, just intrigued by that with you, because a lot of other people in our genre of music, instrumental, contemporary pop, jazz, whatever people decide to call it, that's kind of all they can do or want to do. And I've always, like you, been interested in lyrics and songs.
Well,
And
actually, the main reason why I moved to LA was because I wanted to learn more about songwriting.
no
That was
kidding.
like number one on my list. Is I want to become a better writer, and I want to know more about it. I was lucky to have met a guy. His name was Big Joe Erickson. He lived in, I lived in Portland for, I guess, about 7 years, I guess,
Hmm.
and the Portland area. And he was from Seattle, but we worked together on some stuff. And learned from Tom Bell, who was also living in Seattle, from famous
Bet you by golly, wow.
Philadelphia
Yeah.
Philadelphia International Gamble and Huff, Tom Bell. And so that was one thing at Berkeley. Somehow, I wasn't there that long, I guess, but uh, I missed out on. I mean, I learned a lot of technical stuff about harmony, about improvisation, about chords, but I didn't learn that much about songwriting, like pop
Song.
songwriting. I
Right.
think that was in the era before they really had pop songwriting as a thing that they really taught. Like
Right.
when I was there, I don't know if it was the same with you, but everybody wanted to be a session player or a instrumental, jazz artist, or just basically a player. Everybody was there to be a player. I think at
Right.
Berkeley now, it's not like that. I think people are going there to get like these modern kind of jobs that are more like writing for film and TV, writing for video
Hmm.
games. There's other kinds of jobs, engineering, how to do sound for film and TV,
They've definitely been
engineering
a
wise.
leader in being open and willing to be in front of the line for changing with the times. They
Yeah, I mean, it's
certainly,
a
yeah.
vocational training school. They do their best to you know give people the tools that they can walk out of there and get a job in the real world, which is much better than a lot of the other music schools around that are just still teaching
Right.
Beethoven and Bach and classical stuff, because the market for that is a lot smaller. And that's
Right.
why
Hmm.
you keep hearing about all these great musicians that as both artists and session players that studied at Berkeley, because it's just you do get those tools. Their approach to harmony, they look at modern pop songs and you check out the harmony of those, and so yeah, so yeah, so I luckily, because of working with Joe, I learned about, oh, songs have to have a verse and a B section and a chorus and a bridge. Oh, that's what it's about. I didn't know. That was like kind of like bringing fire to the Neanderthals when I learned that. It's like, wow, really, that's what it is. And unfortunately, I think a lot of Berklee students from my era didn't get to learn that right away.
Yeah.
So when I got down to LA, I was really, that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to learn more about pop music. I think we were talking about different everybody's got a name for different styles of music. They're trying to pigeonhole you all the time. I think most musicians just love music.
Yeah.
They don't need to be pigeonholed. They just want to hear good music no matter what it is, and apply your skills to trying to make that sound better, or figuring out a way that you can get in there and work with that.
Amen. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Nothing like a great melody and a great lyric, or just a great melody and some cool chords. Let's talk about sax
Also,
players.
go ahead. One small other thing. So another thing that happened to me that was actually really positive was after I left Berklee, and before I got into the chemistry thing, I played in a band, and it was like a popular group that played all over New England. We were like the house band at the Oxford Ale House in Cambridge, and we played at Bunratty's and a lot of the local clubs. We played the ski resorts. And the thing that was really great about that is the guitar player in the band would not allow me to play any jazz chords. He would keep yelling at me, play triads, play triads. So I was immediately sort of counter-programmed with all the stuff that I had been learning at Berklee. I had a guy yelling at me, telling me not to use any of that,
right?
Which was really good.
Yeah, it's great. It's fantastic.
Because the first thing that I think Berklee students, after they learn all this crazy stuff, is they want to use it all the time, and that's not so good for them if they're trying to really fit into pop music. And so that was a valuable experience for me.
That's so.
And the
great.
guitar player actually went on to be pretty successful. He joined Hall & Oates, and his name was Jeff Southworth. He played on Kiss on My List and a bunch of their hits. And then he went on to be to get into advertising music in New York, and then did quite well for himself there, I think.
That's great stories. Thanks for sharing that. Let's very briefly just talk about the fact that you've had a couple really talented sax players come through your band that have gone on to have pretty remarkable careers on their own. Kenny Gorelick,
right?
Who tell everybody who that is.
Kenny G.
Kenny G. Basically was he became known through your band. That's where I knew of him as well, and of course Dave Koz, followed as well, and but it's no surprise too, because those guys are really lyrical players. They're monster musicians.
Yeah.
But
they're pretty much nothing like each other either. They're both, except for the fact that they're both very successful.
Yeah.
But musically and personality wise, they're quite different. I mean, they're both charming, and they're great with an audience in their own way, although that is different. But Dave is really all about the showbiz and the show and relating to the audience, and Kenny is too. But Kenny's just sort of a virtuoso of playing a lot of fast licks,
right?
And so he's made that, and playing a lot of ballads, sort of like two things that are a little bit contradictory with each other, although not necessarily in his case, I guess. So I think Kenny found something that worked, and he stuck with it. And Dave is a little more versatile in terms of, he likes to open every time he puts a new tour together. He tends to work with different people and try out different things. So
right.
he's got a little more versatility going for. He's a guy that definitely is or could be a great session player. In fact, back in the day, I used to hire him all the time to play on all kinds of stuff. I was even one time I was working with U2, and I got him to play on a U2 album, in fact.
And he slayed it, right? He did a great job.
Always.
Of course.
I mean,
right.
And the crazy thing about him is that he doesn't really, I don't think he thinks technically. He can just do it. He's just really musical.
Right.
And, it's not like he's really studied like tons of harm. I guess he studied enough to make it work, but he just seems to have it. Whatever that thing is that you got to have of just being able to play your instrument and make music, he's got it, and he's had it from an early age. Because
Yeah.
I remember seeing some videos of him and his brother Jeff playing like bar mitzvahs when they were a lot younger, and Dave was already he had his thing already working back then when he was like 15 or something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was lucky to work with both of those guys. I met Kenny because I had sort of tried out every sax player and every guitarist when I was putting my band, the original Jeff Lorber Fusion, together. I just couldn't find the right guy for that like fourth member. And then there was this R&B band from the Portland area called Pleasure, who was a fantastic group. They made some fantastic albums. And the keyboard player from the group lived in Seattle, and he recommended Kenny. And somehow Kenny had already, he had a hustle going where he would be a contractor for different people that would come through town. He would put together, like if the ice show was coming through and they needed like 4 clarinet players
and be that guy, right?
And a French horn player, he would be a contractor that would do that. And he would put himself on the gig too, because he could double, he could play clarinet and flute, and he could play a bunch of woodwind instruments. So I remember when I called him up, he was coming down to Portland like in the next week to play with Liberace, to play in the band for Liberace. So
that's rich, right? That's great.
So he came over, and I kind of checked him out. And to be honest with you, at first I wasn't tremendously impressed by his playing, but I was impressed by his attitude, which was real positive. And for whatever reason, a lot of the musicians that I met in Portland at that time were just sort of like, oh, you want to go on the road and like try to tour around and be a successful musician? That sounds like, that sounds like a lot of work. I'm not really into that. That's,
funny.
people didn't have that kind of
drive,
ambition,
drive, intention, focus.
So Kenny had it, and
right.
So I really liked that about him right off. So that was enough to give him a chance. And and we worked together for a number of years, and we became really good friends, and and we had a lot of success together with those records. And what's funny is in later years, I tried recutting some of those early songs, and I thought, okay, well now I'm working with like the best musicians on the planet here in the LA studio scene. I'm sure we can do better versions of these songs than I did way back when with Kenny G.
One would think
those guys, those bar band guys from Portland that I used to work with, but I couldn't really. I mean, some of them came out okay, but there was something about that. What happens to you when you play with the same guys over and over again for years, and you get that sort of telepathic, communication between each other, and that all those years of sitting in a band together and going through hard times, and something happens where you kind of create a tightness and that can't be beat, and I think those early records show that. So I couldn't beat it with the LA studio cats. For the most part.
That's so interesting, and also your reference. It's not just the hours of playing together on stage, but it's the more hours sitting in the van and coffee shops and waiting rooms of hotels or
there's a lot of that.
airports, right? Yeah, it does create a telepathy and just a sense of humor together, and like you peel back all the glamour and enough 5 a.m. lobby calls with people. It creates a bond. It really does. It bonds you. Let's talk about before we get to the end of the show and the closing questions, and I want to open up the audience for asking questions too or making comments. But I want to talk about the PKD Foundation and health. So would you talk about your experience with kidney disease?
Sure.
2004, I believe you got sick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's
it's been in your family.
It's just something that's in my family, my mother's side of the family, something called polycystic kidney disease. And what happens is your cells in your kidneys, it's kind of like they get the wrong the wrong software is going on in the cell development, and instead of producing the right kind of cells, they produce cysts, and the cysts grow, and eventually they get big enough that it stops your kidneys from working, and you become what they call end stage renal failure, or you got to get a transplant, or you got to go to dialysis, or you got to take care of it some kind of way. And I was very lucky to get a transplant for my wife. And I'm going on, it'll be 18 years in November. So I'm really lucky. I mean, the good news is that if you can find a transplant donor, it's probably the most common type of transplant. They really got it down. The drugs are, they work very well for most people. So I've been very lucky with that. So my mother didn't really have the chance to have a transplant. They didn't really have that together when she got sick. But I have, my sister had a transplant in also, and so she's doing well. And yeah, it's just something that you have, and then depending on your physiology and how aggressive the disease is, you may or may not get to that point where you need a transplant. But it's just in my family, and so I support the Polycystic Kidney Foundation, and my right now my friend David Benoit is dealing with getting a transplant, so I'm supporting him by kind of letting him know what I went through and what to expect. But that's kind of the story.
And from what I read, since 1982, the PKD Foundation has funded more than 1,300 research projects and leveraged $1.5 billion in research funds. So,
wow, I didn't know it was quite that. That's good.
Yeah.
I've shipped in a little bit of a couple percentage points in there somewhere.
I'm sure they appreciate that. If anybody's interested in learning more about it, go look them up. I
was able to make a record. I guess it was about, I don't know, probably 8 years ago with, it was mostly me and Chuck Loeb, but it's a record called Bop, and like the subtitle is, it's, to support polycystic kidney research or something. And so we got really just an incredible all-star band. The rhythm section was Harvey Mason and Brian Bromberg.
Wow. And
we got Rick Braun and Till Bronner, and Everett Harp was on it. Randy Brecker was on a track, and John, bass player,
Patitucci.
Patitucci, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
Did we find out who the alto player was?
Oh my gosh! I feel like I'm on a game show and the buzzer is about to go. How many lifetimes did this man have? Okay, I'm not sure. I don't know. Is it Richie Cole?
Yeah, that's it.
What?
What does she win? Jeff, tell her.
I had 5 names because I'm like, how old was freaking Buddy Rich? Like, how many saxophone players did he go through?
Well, you got it. That's it.
I started with Pete Yellen, and I was like, I don't know. I think that was too early. And then I was like, okay, we got to get closer. And Richie Cole, I feel I'm going to reward myself with something. But there are a couple of questions.
I was just going to say, I wonder if that was the era. There's some very famous Buddy Rich tapes that were made where, he had to use a lot of young musicians that weren't always quite ready for the job. So there's some famous tapes where the musicians taped Buddy yelling at the band.
Wow. Now that would be cool.
Like classic. They're classic.
They are classic. Yeah.
So one of the other ones I thought it might have been was Jim Mosher.
Yeah. No, Richie is the most famous of those. That's
okay.
Right.
That's pretty cool. So there are a couple of, Frankie J was saying the only thing he could ever play on the piano was chopsticks. Chris Rossetti wanted to know, it's a Philly question. So I'm a Jersey girl, and I was in Philly 2 months ago with my mom and her friend who had never been there. So we had to take him to get cheesesteak. So the question is, Pat's, Jim's, or Genoa?
I'm not a real big meat eater, so I'm not really the guy. I mean, I do eat, chicken and fish, but I'm not really the guy to ask. But
Chris, there's your answer to your question.
I think
great question, Chris.
What is it, Pat's? What was it again?
Pat's, Jim's, or Genoa. Now, and I tell you,
Well,
I have to be standing in front of the place to tell you which one we eat at. It's at like 4th or 3rd in Bainbridge.
Yeah, there's
or South. I'm
Pat's
sorry.
Well, Pat's is one of the real famous ones, but there's another one like Geno's or something else.
Genoa.
Yeah.
Is that the one? Yeah, it might. Yep. So, okay. Well, Chris, there's the answer to that question.
Well, for sure, you can't go wrong with Pat's.
Yeah, you're not gonna be upset when you leave.
That leads to one of the questions that I want to ask you. Also, health. Have you changed your diet and exercise once you got sick, or were you always a healthy eater?
I've always been sort of tried to be like that. I actually got into macrobiotics when I was in Boston. In fact,
me too. Yeah, that's where I discovered that.
In fact, it's funny because everywhere you see these Erewhon stores all over the place here in LA.
Mushio Kushi, or what did I? Yeah,
I used to go to Michio's lectures all the time, and
Michio.
I knew Lily really well, who was also a piano player, his daughter, and so I knew the people that started that company. I'm sure it's gone through a lot of changes since then. But
you've always lived a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, I've tried to do that as much as possible.
Me too, as well. Yeah,
like being a musician, especially if you're on the road a lot. If you don't do that, you're not gonna. It's not going to be easy for you to play or to survive, or it's the road is a tough thing to deal with. So you got to do your best to kind of stay healthy. It's it's a must, kind of.
I'm a big believer in that. I've gone from macrobiotic, vegetarian, vegan, and pescatarian since I was 15, and that's
nice.
I'm still doing it.
You got a real head start.
I kind of I read
earlier than
I had a friend who was a vegetarian in junior high school. But I also read Diet for a Small Planet, and it said what was in hot dogs and all that stuff. And it just immediately I stopped eating hot dogs and drinking Coke, and
you're not going to believe where I heard about vegetarian diet. So I don't even remember how old I was, probably like 14 or something, but I read all the James Bond novels.
I did too, but that didn't. How did that influence your diet?
In one of the James Bond novels, he goes to like a health place and he eats nothing but vegetarian food. And I heard that, I read that, and I said, like, that makes a lot of sense. That sounds good. That sounds like something you should do. So ever since then, I just sort of like thought that, like, and then of course the whole health food thing became bigger and bigger, and
absolutely.
So it just always made sense to me, and I was kind of inclined in that direction, but I didn't really get into it until I was out on my own as living in Boston by myself.
Well, so far so good. It seems to be working for us. And
knock on something here.
I want to talk about. We've got about 10 minutes left in the conversation, and I think Dr. Lisa's prize for finding out the name of the sax player should be your new Jeff Lorber Fusion Spacetime record, which just came out. We're gonna figure out how to get you a copy.
And Dr. Lisa approves this message.
But let's talk a little bit about that record and also your jazz funk soul album that's going to be coming out later, because you've got two new projects.
Yeah, well, the Spacetime's been around for a little while, but the Jeff, it's so basically I have two different things that I do. I have my Jeff Lorber Fusion thing, which at this point is essentially a trio most of the time, and
which, by the way, I heard you play. I think it was last Saturday or Sunday down at Festival of Arts, and boy, you don't need anything more than a trio. Joel Taylor, and Joel is great, absolutely.
Jimmy's really a big part of it. I mean,
Jimmy Haslip, of course.
I try not to. I try not to take any gigs if he's not part of it, because he's kind of like
I can see
a great
why.
Soloist and a bass player, and then then we use different drummers. But so that's one thing that I do that I really love, and then the other group that I'm part of is called Jazz Funk Soul with Paul Jackson Jr. and Everett Harp, and so that's sort of like what they call like one of these package kind of things that is works for bigger like festivals and things like that.
Yeah, and
so it's nice to have two different kind of things happening that are good for different kinds of venues and different situations. And so the Spacetime album was, all of my Jeff Lorber Fusion records for like the last at least 8 years were co-produced with Jimmy, so he's like a really big part of it. and he contributes a lot. He's a very good producer, by the way. He produces a lot of stuff. I think when he was in the Yellow Jackets, he was probably really helping out with that, that kind of overview point of view on how to make a record with a theme and with a unified approach to the music and stuff. Because that's what we do together when we work together. And then the jazz funk soul thing, like that's really, ever since I started that's like a really new thing for me, because I've been doing my Jeff Lorber Fusion thing since the 70s, but I've never been in a band until this group where I'm dealing with other like very strong musicians and writers and egos, and we have to work it out, and it's like a very different dynamic. And,
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
No, because it's real. I mean, in any industry, I think working with three people that are that amazingly talented, like it's a thing that has to be taken into consideration. So I'm just glad you said it.
Yeah.
But I also think, along with the challenges that come with that, some of my favorite bands have been when we're all leaders and artists. I think great leaders make great sidemen.
Yeah.
As
I
well.
mean, you understand what the role of, like when you have to just be an accompanist, which as a guitar player, you, and as a keyboard player, we both go back and forth from being a soloist to an accompanist, both in the studio and live. And you just got to know what your role is, and you got to know how to take the responsibility for what that role means. And the other guys have to do the same thing. That's what a successful band is, whenever each person understands the responsibility to hold down the beat or to hold down the bass line, whatever they need to do. And then it all works together. And working with those guys is really fun because, Everett and Paul, they just play on such a high level already.
Yeah.
That just keeping up with them, it's just very inspiring. It's like, okay, you just played that solo. I have to keep up with that. Let's see what I can do.
So that's so interesting. So you're that guy as well. I wouldn't have thought that, but I feel the same way. Like I surround myself with great people, a lot of the people that we both play with, and then I do my best to keep up. That's what and I love that. I love being surrounded by people that I just want to
Well, the other thing is that there's like a thing between keyboard players and guitar players where you can really easily get in each other's way, or you're both dealing with mid-range instruments. So if we're both comping, like when I played, when Chuck was in the band, like Chuck was old school jazz. Like when he would just stroll, he would lay out and let me comp, and he wouldn't try to comp when I was comping.
Right.
Whereas with Paul's a much more modern player, and of course he just happens to be probably the best rhythm guitar player on the planet.
Yes,
without even exaggerating at all.
Yeah.
And we've just been working together for a long time, so we sort of know how to fit in with each other and play either like the same rhythms or rhythms that and the range and the kind of voicings, whether they're open, like real open voicings, or voicings that have, I guess a guitar is just automatically is a little bit of an open voicing. It tends to be, right?
Absolutely, unless you just stick to 2 or 3 notes. But also, I think from all of these years of people working together and knowing each other so well, we kind of end up writing for each other. I can hear what Abraham's going to play, or JR, or Louise, or Gerald, or and certainly Paul and Michael Thompson, and so I enjoy leaving that space for them, because I already know what's going to happen, sonically, range wise, all kinds of things, and it's so interesting. But and what really comes through is the relationship, the friendship, the love, the respect. The shared passion for what we all do, and the joy for that we still get to do it as the business continues to change and evolve.
I think I mean those guys definitely, and I am too. It's about the music. It's not about the money.
Right.
It's not about anything else. It's just about the love of music and getting to. We're just lucky that we get to do what we love to. We get to make a living doing what we love to do, and we get to travel around and play for people, and yeah, it's something I'm very, very grateful for.
I sure am too. And it's nice to hear you say that. Not, there's not everybody brings gratitude into it, but the ones that really their music really says something, there is gratitude, that comes through as well. But I'm with you on that 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 3 closing questions, but before I get to them, Dr. Lisa, do you have any questions, or is there anybody else in the audience that?
There were no more questions, and I'm actually still rather reveling in my nailing that that game show
you
quiz.
sure did.
So I'm just taking a moment here to feel pretty damn good about myself, is what's happening on this end.
I knew I could count on you.
But this has been exciting because, Jeff, I will tell you, at some point listening to Sirius FM, I really thought like every 2 songs, the third one was going to be one of yours. I was like, how many bands does this man have? And is this a strategy for getting played a lot? Like, do you just need to create new bands? But I think you still have to be good too for them to play you. So I'm going with that. And I will just credit the both of you. I think, Terry, when you said great artists or great musicians, I think that's the thing. I think there has to be, obviously you have to be good at your craft and passionate about it, but I think you also have to have a humility that doesn't require you saying things like, I'm humble. And so you two have learned to be really great leaders, because at some point you knew what it was to be a really, really good follower, and you're able to navigate between those 2 spaces and do it with honor and grace and ease. And that sets both of you apart.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
It's very kind. And I stand in agreement with you on that. Jeff, you certainly you shine a really strong light in going and continuing to go through your career that way in creating music. That's probably part of the reason I love your music so much, is because of the way you do it.
Chris had one other question. He wanted to know if there was any other instrument Jeff wished he had learned to play.
Well, he does play.
Uh-oh.
I play guitar, but
there you go.
It's not easy for me. I'm still struggling with it, but I've been playing it for a long time, and I'm still, I absolutely love it. I love playing guitar. It's just really, it's a total passion. Like with a keyboard, it's you can be more cerebral about it. You look at it and you see these keys, you see the black and white. With guitar, it's like you got your fingers right on the strings, and you feel that vibration. Right. It's more intimate. It's a more intimate kind of relationship with the instrument. But yeah, so that's something I'm working on. I play guitar on my records, but just basically simple parts that fit into the arrangement, and then I bring the real guitar players in to do stuff that I can't do.
Well, thanks for that, Chris. Thanks for that question.
Thank you. But you also, you're talking about feeling the vibration of the instrument and everything. You also play acoustic guitar too, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to write out a couple of exercises for you for the right hand stuff. We were talking about that the other day, because you'll get it so quickly, and it's just going to open some doors for you. I can't wait to share that with you. Right. So my 3 closing questions. Do you have like another 5 minutes? Can I keep you?
Sure.
Since the show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally?
Well, first of all, when I think about making it, I think about just things that have happened to me where I've had opportunities that I was prepared for, and I took advantage of those opportunities, and I was able to make the most of them, and then sort of advance to higher levels of playing music or meeting people or having other opportunities. And so like one of those in particular was when I was living in Portland, and I was teaching a little class there. It was like a jazz lab class where we were just playing kind of tunes out of the real book. And one of the students in the class had some studio time at a local 16-track studio, and he invited me to come down. I came down there. They were having a hard time getting the song together. I sort of stepped in and helped them arrange it. And the engineer there, he was...
I just lost your audio, Jeff.
Can you hear me?
So did I.
Oh, say, I just lost your audio for the last 30 seconds. So the engineer.
That's what happened. Yeah.
Mhm.
It was Herb Alpert, actually, believe it or not. I'm working with him on some stuff right now. But anyway, basically this engineer allowed me to get into the studio, which back then, that wasn't easy. If you wanted to get into a studio, you had to like spend hundreds of dollars an hour or something. Not everybody had access to that. And that really led to me making a demo and getting a deal on a small label, which led to that one opportunity like turned into so many things. So that's just it. It's just about being ready to be prepared to step in there and take control and make use of the opportunities that you get.
That makes sense. Second question, can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Well, definitely what I just said was be
that was the first one,
and have you and
Oh, did I just lose him, or did you lose him too, Terry?
Yeah, I don't hear you again.
How about now?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Tell Herb we'll call him back in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, what you said earlier about being humble and being a listener, and you got to be able to step in when you can step in, but you also have to listen, be a good listener, and you have to be a supportive person, and and relationships that to a lot of times that's something that makes a tremendous difference with where you meet people, you create a relationship there, like you're talking about Michael Thompson or John Roberts. I mean,
Robinson.
John Robinson.
Yeah.
And you never know where those things will take you. So you just got to sort of, just be ready to take advantage of the opportunities that happen, and then also to be sensitive and aware of other people's feelings, and just navigate. It's just really important, the personal relationships that you make, and how those can blossom into other things.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. Thank you for that. My final question, and then afterwards, if you've got any other closing thoughts, you're welcome to end our show. Closing question: at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Just to relax. I can't. It's just funny because it's all the experiences that you have, whether they're positive or negative, they're all important, and they all make you who you are. And you can get to these sort of crisis moments where you just feel like everything's on the line, and are you going to be able to get through it? And I think that's one thing that's really helped me as I get older. I'm a little more relaxed about.
Right. Yeah.
When you're a musician, it's kind of like a feast and famine thing. You don't know where your next dollar is coming from, so it's a little bit of an unstable way to make a living. And at this point, I just feel a little more secure that I've reached a level where I don't have to worry about that as much as I used to, and I'm more confident. And so I think when you're younger, you kind of like that insecurity weighs a little heavier. But then again, it's that kind of creates the energy to kind of move forward and really work hard too. So it is important.
You're reminding me of a conversation I had with Tommy Newsom years ago. Look it up if you don't know who he is. But I asked Tommy, because I was working at NBC doing a late night talk show as well. And Tommy, the question to him was, when did you guys, all in the Tonight Show band with Johnny Carson, when did you all feel like you had the job? When did you quit thinking like freelance musicians?
Never.
And
is that what he said?
He said, after about 20 years, we all kind of started to relax into it and realized we had a job. We didn't have to worry anymore. blew my mind, but right. It's, this is like the job, the TV job, and
I'm going to make it. I think I'm going to make it.
Yeah.
One thing that I tell people, musicians, like one thing that you got to know going in, it's not like any other profession where there's an easy, road that you can take from A to Z. If you're like a doctor or a lawyer or something, it might be it's a little bit like more understandable that you go to school, you get a degree, there's more of a straight line. But musicians, you never know what's you have to be ready for any opportunity, for anything to happen. And I think almost every musician makes their own unique way through life and through learning about music and learning how to write, and that's what makes it so interesting, I guess, too. But yeah, I think that's why so many musicians are sort of super entrepreneurs.
Oh,
like
right.
They sort of have to be, because just being able to play isn't enough. That's not enough. You got to be a salesman. You got to be a promotion man. You got to know how to make people feel relaxed, or like if you're in a session, you got to create like a sense of fun where everybody's having a good time and they're going to give their best work. So there's a lot of psychology involved with a lot of different things that you encounter, and you have to, it kind of tests your ingenuity and your sense of creativity to be able to come up with the best solutions to all those different problems that you encounter.
Very well said. Yeah. And it's not something you learn in a class, or certainly in a practice room, practicing by yourself alone 8 hours a day and not practicing any kind of communication or interpersonal skills either. So in some ways it's a completely different hat to wear, but it's crucial. It's absolutely crucial. People want to be around people that they enjoy, that they can feel safe with, like you said, and inspired and lifted. And it's so wonderful that you just expressed that with such clarity.
Yeah. There's a lot of those great players from we'll never hear of because they just didn't learn that other part of it. The promotion man, marketing man, part of being a musician.
Which I would imagine, like myself, you don't enjoy that part as much as you enjoy the actual creative playing music. But
I do what I have to do to make it happen. But
with a great attitude. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But if you don't have it's like at one point I was doing nothing but working on dance remixes, and
the Paula Abdul period and all of that. During the Paula Abdul period,
it was around then. And one of the guys that I was working with would always say, like, well, at the end of the day, like, we put a cassette on somebody's desk and they listen to it and they either like it or they don't. And if they like it, you're going to get called to do the next one. If they're not, they won't.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, you have to put something on tape that's going to be a positive experience for the person that listens to it. And that's what you have to create. So that's part of the job too.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, I know that you've got Herb's waiting for you to call him back, and you've got an early morning tomorrow.
Like burning up my phone lines here.
Tell him what you were doing. You got a life.
He knows he's 86 years old. He's touring and he's still doing interviews and he's on the phone. So he's still promoting himself too. He's still promoting and marketing himself.
Yeah.
And he was the president and founder of both A&M Records and Rondor Publishing and the publishing company. And so he knows all about that stuff, about how marketing and promotion is what it takes.
And he also has a beautiful live performance venue in LA. We just played there last week, and
oh, nice.
Vibrato. So everybody go check it out. Just world class, lovely staff, and his daughter Eden runs the place. And, so another person who understands it's not just about the one thing. It's not just about the music. It's the broader look.
Yeah. But I remember when I used to work at A&M Studios, he would often just come hang out in the hall or hang out, like come into the session, and he just loves music. He just
Yeah.
loves it, and he likes to be around it, and he just has such a great vibe. You know, people would love to be around him, and you know, I think you know that's really what's enabled him to have a career that's lasted this long and to be that successful.
And by the way, when you go to Vibrato, all of the beautiful paintings on the wall are
That's
Herb's.
Herb.
He's a beautiful painter as well. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
sculpture.
Oh, I didn't know that. Not surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a big sculpture, like it's like an aircraft hangar out, you know, on his property where they're building these like gigantic brass sculptures and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. Well, Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for
my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's been a blast and very
I'm glad
informative.
I finally figured out how to hit the on switch to get into your thing here.
Right. Well, you and I
took a while.
We can run our recording studios, but you know, these new, you know, these little apps without instructions can be challenging. Dr. Lisa, thank you always for
Thanks,
moderating the show.
Thank you.
Appreciate
It's
you.
always a pleasure to be here.
And thank you to our virtual audience and everybody who asked their questions, and of course to the audience who listens to the archive of these shows. We really appreciate you, Jeff and Dr. Lisa and I can speak on behalf of all three. We appreciate you spending our time with us. And I encourage everybody to stay safe and stay inspired. And we'll see y'all next week. So, Jeff, thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Wollman.